Thanks for tuning in to the Our Football Network, the Our Football YouTube channel. I'm Greg DePalma, and we're going to be talking Atlanta Falcons football. And whenever we talk about the Atlanta Falcons, Kevin Knight from thefalcoholic.com joins us. Kevin, how's it going?
Well, it's been better. It was nice riding the high of that 6-3 start, but it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day around here as the Falcons have once again fallen to 500 and are in danger of missing the playoffs to the Buccaneers. So yeah, all very familiar here. Greg, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm a Jet fan, so you know how I'm doing. Yeah. So it's on to the future once again. So anyway, I was talking a couple of weeks ago, we were looking over the schedule about how Tampa Bay, if they were going to have a chance to catch Atlanta, the best chance they were going to have was going to have to come in these 2 weeks, last week and this week, because Tampa Bay was playing Carolina and Las Vegas, and Atlanta was playing two very tough teams. They were playing the Chargers and the Vikings. So if you're a Tampa Bay fan, check one off the box. But now they still need this one, because Atlanta could just go out there with all the losing recently, beat Minnesota, no matter what Tampa does. And as long as Atlanta just, especially with their schedule being a lot easier, they're still in a good spot. Plus, it would be just a really good psychological win to beat a team as good as Minnesota with the schedule coming up. You would feel Atlanta would be right back where they need to be to make a run to win this division. Is that how you're taking it as well?
Yeah, if the Falcons could find a way to steal this game, they'll be right back probably in the upper 70s in terms of playoff chances, because the schedule is easy. Like, Atlanta has certainly not played well over the past 3 weeks. It's been pretty bad. But that being said, the two teams you mentioned in the Raiders and Panthers, the Falcons also play them later this year. And they also play the Giants. So that's 3 games, 1 game against a team that is definitely tanking. And, the Falcons don't exactly have to be good to win those games. They probably have to be better than they were last week, certainly, but they don't have to be good. So that is reasonable. What feels a little unreasonable is expecting the Falcons to win this Vikings game, given what they've looked like the last 3 weeks. But, revenge game for Kirk. Kirk very well could be playing for his Atlanta future this week, because it's been a kind of what you'd expect from, like, especially before the last 3 weeks. It was going, I think, pretty well. That obviously Kirk had a slow start, but you saw that at the end of that Eagles game where he put on that heroic game-winning drive and really just willed the Falcons to victory, and that was great. We saw him just utterly dismantle the Buccaneers 2 times. And then it's not gone so well, starting with a game against the Saints that was not Kirk Cousins' fault. It certainly wasn't a great game from him, but Younghoe Koo misses 3 field goals. You lose by 3. Not Kirk Cousins' fault, but that was sort of the start of maybe some offensive issues. Then against the Broncos, the whole team no-shows. Now, Kirk was a big part of that, but the whole team, so you're like, okay, well, we're going to have the bye week. We'll give Kirk a chance to reset this offense. We'll see if we can fix some things on defense. We can see if we can clean up our mistakes, because this is one of the more mistake-prone teams in terms of penalties in the NFL. They come out of the bye against the Chargers. 2 weeks to prepare. Chargers coming off a Monday night game as well. So the Falcons,
the East trip.
Yep, and the Eastern trip. So the Falcons defense comes out, has their best game of the year. They get 5 sacks, which is which is 50% of their previous total, by the way.
Yeah.
They don't allow the Chargers to score a touchdown. The offense, the running game comes out, has an efficient day on the ground, even though that's still a little bit inconsistent. And it doesn't matter, because Kirk Cousins throws 4 interceptions, including the pick 6 that lost Atlanta the game, because without that pick 6, the Chargers are sitting at 10 points. And it wasn't just the interceptions, because that would be one thing by itself, right? 4 interceptions, probably a career worst day. You're like, wow, okay, well, it was everything. The interception, like, you look at the Chargers defense and people see, well, Los Angeles has the number 1 scoring defense. It's a good defense. It is a very good defense. Kirk Cousins threw the ball directly to the Chargers on multiple occasions, when if he had been reading the field and going through his keys like you would expect even an experienced rookie to do on some of these routes, he would know to never throw these footballs. We're talking about triple coverage. We're talking about throwing an out route against a corner that's sitting on it. Like, and not only is he making bad decisions, but the balls, they don't have any velocity either. They're just dying. And this is coming off 2 weeks of rest.
Yes.
That Kirk is looking like this. And I think that is why, because schedule-wise, the Falcons just need to win 4 of the next 5. That sounds really hard. But again, you do play the Giants, who are tanking. You do play the Raiders, who aren't tanking, but maybe should consider tanking. And you play the Panthers, who the Falcons beat by 20 points last time they met. Now the Panthers are looking a little bit better now.
They are.
Still. So you just need to steal a game against either the Vikings, unlikely in the best of circumstances, or the Commanders, who, to be fair, are looking a little bit more mortal. Or you just need the Bucs to lose 2 games, which, again, that's not necessarily impossible either, because the Bucs also have to essentially win out or close. They can afford 1 loss. Because they have to get ahead of the Falcons. They can't tie them. So in a neutral situation, you'd be like, well, you still like the Falcons' odds to basically, win 3 or 4 games and still be able to, and the Bucs don't have much of a chance to get past them if they do that. But after this game with Kirk, it's like, what can we expect from Kirk going forward if this is how he looks coming off a bye with multiple weeks of prep? This was an unplayable quarterback. Like, we already knew he couldn't move. So, like, that's part of the Kirk Cousins experience at this stage. You could scheme around that. But he can't execute play action, apparently, which is part of the reason they're not running it. And he now can't really drive the ball either, unless he has a perfectly clean pocket where he can set his feet and has plenty of time. Which sometimes he does. You do get that sometimes. We've seen some great... He's still capable of making great throws if he's clean and has plenty of time to set up the throw, but this is the NFL. You don't get those opportunities very often. So you add the bad decision-making on top of it, and it's like, what? You can't play this man if he continues to look like this. This is unplayable quarterbacking when you combine his limitations with bad decision-making and a lack of arm strength. So, well, it's very dicey.
The other thing, though, that could happen, and more of a chance it happens, is if, and I look at this also maybe from a Tampa perspective, is if Atlanta wins this week and they're both tied again next week at 7-6, with Atlanta, of course, with the lead. Now you start to look at a situation where both teams might be able to make the playoffs, because one of those teams, of course, on Atlanta's schedule being the Washington Redskins. Well, hopefully they'll be the Redskins once again. We're hearing that might be coming back.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, but that game being the second to last game of the season, and all of a sudden you're looking at that possibility, is that if Atlanta could beat Washington and Tampa just keeps winning and Atlanta keeps winning, then maybe both teams can get in. But that scenario probably only happens if Atlanta can win this week. A little bit harder because it'll be 2 games back, and it just makes it just a little bit harder. Not that it's insurmountable. It's still something that could happen. All right, so let's talk about. So what are the fans saying right now? Because we all know who's sitting behind Cousins, and we all know what happened during the draft. That this is supposed to be a 2-year, maybe 2 years. Could be next year, but it's going to take our time. And all of a sudden, in year 1, at this point, and it's like, are the fans already starting to say to themselves, well, let's just put the kid in. It can't get worse than this.
Yeah, that is. I mean, after this game, especially, I don't know that there were much in terms of serious calls for benching Cousins until this game.
Okay.
And I think it's because of, well, obviously the contract. You're just expecting to play Cousins as long as he's giving you at least average football. Which, to Cousins' credit, I think he was before this, especially before this 3-game skid. I think you looked at the season in totality, and you would say he was giving you top 15 quarterback play on the whole. These last 3 games, starting with the Saints game, which, again, not entirely his fault, and then it kind of got worse, the Broncos game, and now it comes to a head after the bye week. It's, you're absolutely correct, because you can't really play much worse than what Cousins played against the Chargers. Because, I mean, if you're worried about Michael Penix being able to read the field and worried about him throwing interceptions. Well, Kirk Cousins just threw 4 and isn't reading the field. So it's like, okay, you're not really losing anything.
Sure.
One thing Michael Penix will do is throw the hell out of the football. That is his calling card, and the offense is clearly limited by Kirk's lack of arm strength, even, before this stuff happened. So, there has to be a reason to keep Cousins in that's beyond sunk cost fallacy, right? You can't just say, we gave him this contract, we have to play him. That's what losing franchises do.
Sure.
I choose to believe that we're not that, even though they have been that for 7 seasons now. So, this is an opportunity for a new coaching staff to come in and say, we're not going to go down that path because you can't afford to. This was, you signed Cousins to make the playoffs this year, but if he can't get you there, this isn't like last year, where you have Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, and you're like, well, neither one of these options are getting us to the playoffs. This is like, we're hoping for a prayer by putting Heineke in. What do you know? He's not better than Desmond Ridder. Okay, whatever. In this scenario, you do have a compelling option to go to, and we don't know how it'll go, but there's at least upside to playing Michael Penix no matter what, because you're getting him valuable reps. So even if he comes in, doesn't save your season, you're giving him an opportunity to do that, which that's pretty significant to give. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, obviously, but in some ways it's not, because the other guy is the one who screwed your team. Like, you're just trying to salvage it. So if he doesn't do it, no one's going to be all that upset.
No.
Like, well, he's a rookie, whatever. But if he does, you're launching, his career essentially against 3 easy defenses too.
True.
We talked about the Giants. We talked about the Panthers. We talked about the Raiders. You couldn't give him a softer landing. And the one harder defense is the Commanders, and that defense isn't all that great either. So
yes.
Now that could also be an argument for keeping Kirk in, but we know what Kirk's ceiling is. If he comes out and flames out against the Vikings, we know that the second Kirk Cousins comes up against a defense that's semi-capable, he's not a functioning quarterback anymore. He can beat up on the bad defenses, and I'm sure if you put him out there against these teams, he'll probably play better. But if he's that limited, physically, he's not likely to improve much. Like, he's already 37, so we're going downhill here. So if his physical limitations are holding back the offense, there's not really any long-term reason to not go to Michael Penix here, unless you're just trying to, I guess, rehab his trade value. But, I mean, come on.
Well, how's his arm? Because, like you said, the arm looked dead on Sunday. Did the arm look dead at any point before Sunday?
Yes, week 1. He's had some bad games.
But where the arm looked like he was 37 years old, it just didn't look like it was lively. Okay.
Yeah, and he's had some games where it's been better, but a lot of that has to do with he needs a clean pocket and he needs time to absolutely set his feet, because if he can't do that, he doesn't have the arm strength to overcome it. He can overcome it with mechanics. He is very sound mechanically and things like that. He can kind of overcome it if he has a clean pocket and a clean window, but this is the NFL. You're not routinely going to get that. And if you go from being an A+ thrower with a clean pocket to an F thrower with a dirty pocket, that's not really playable in the NFL.
That sounds like a rookie.
Yeah. So, given the other limitations that he places on the offense, that you can't really run play action, you can't move the pocket at all, it doesn't seem worth it to me to tie your franchise to him going forward and continue to play him if now he's cost you a 4-game losing streak where, let's be honest, against the Vikings, it's probably not going to go very well. That defense is not a good matchup for him.
No.
So this is the type of move that's probably cold-hearted, because you're like, well, he went up against 3 of the NFL's best defenses, and now you're benching him. Yeah. I mean, even against good teams, he has limitations that put a ceiling on the offense. Against the Bucs, who at the time, were down multiple corners and multiple players, and that defense was a catastrophe. And he was shredding them, and it looked great. I had fun watching it. But you're not going to play defenses that bad. Like, even these other defenses that they're going to play, they're pretty bad, but they're not going to be as bad as that defense. And if the only time he's going to give me plus play is against the worst defenses in the NFL, That's not
Yeah.
a compelling reason to continue to start him. I get that they
No.
may want to rehab his trade value by having him shred these cupcake teams to end the year. But is that, should that be your priority, or should it be
No.
putting your position in a team to make the playoffs? Because it's still very realistic. I mean, especially if you win this game, but if they win this game, he's not getting benched. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Yes.
But,
by the way, do you think that if this was next week and they face, what do they get? Do they have the Giants next?
I think it's the Raiders.
Is it the Raiders next? Okay. So let's say we're at Raider week and he's just performed the way he did last week. Do you think the change comes this week? And the only reason that it's not is because it's Minnesota. It's, well, we can't do it now. We've kind of almost owed it to him to just give him this one more chance against his former team. There's no way we could kind of do this to him now. Do you think that has a lot to do with it, or not really?
I don't think it has much to do with it. I think they were going to give him this week no matter what. They don't want to bench him. I think they know it makes them look really foolish. The only thing that would make them look more foolish is continuing to play him. So, it's kind of, I don't envy them having to be in this spot or make these decisions. But he was always going to get this week regardless of the opponent. I think, honestly, they'd probably prefer this to be the the Raiders game instead of the Vikings game, because I think they realize, like, man, we're really, like, he's had to go up against the Broncos, then the Chargers, then the Vikings. We're talking about three of the NFL's best defenses. So a downward slump was to be expected. It's just the Chargers didn't really force those interceptions. That's the thing. It's like, yes, it was a good defense, but the Chargers didn't make you throw into triple coverage, or guys were coming open. If he had surveyed the field and made his reads, there were open options on most of those interceptions. He just picked the wrong one. And gave the rookie, the cornerback making his first start, the rookie,
Tar heel still,
just because he was just throwing the ball right to him. So I mean, yeah, I obviously I think it would be better for him if he could just play an easier opponent this week and have a chance to bounce back. But
that ain't happening.
I mean, I think it's well, either way, you have to find a way to do something against this Vikings team, or we're not going to be able to keep going. Now, they very likely will still continue to roll with him, even if he has another bad game. I just think that would be a bad decision. I think this week.
So most of this discussion right now, and the fans, this is just us talking, the fans talking. You don't think there's any way that they're even considering this right now?
I mean, I don't think
seriously.
I don't think it's crazy that they're not considering it for this week. But I think if he looks like anything resembling last week, this week, then you have to do it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But I think it's 50-50 if they will. But I think I think a coach that is really interested in a coach that I think this is a defining moment for Raheem Morris is if Kirk Cousins looks like he did last week, or just even looks just marginally better. That's not a quarterback that is taking you anywhere.
No.
And the fact that you paid him a lot of money is unfortunate, but whether you play him or not, you owe him that money. So you're not obligated to continue playing him. So if you have that and he looks terrible again and you don't bench him, I think that's probably going to cost you the playoffs, but who knows? We don't know that Michael Penix will be better, but there's upside. I mean, and I think people would say there's upside to playing Kirk because maybe he could rehab his value enough in a trade that you could offload him. But I would say I think it's more important to play Penix and get him the critical reps here so we know what we have in him next year. How do you feel comfortable going to Penix next year if you don't even see him? So, you will see him at some point, you would think. I mean, because it seems like it's one or the other. It seems like, well, if he doesn't play well, then that can't last. And if he plays well enough, even if it's every other week, well, then we know he's going to keep playing. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. So I think the decision will be made for them at some point. I don't think they're going to have a tough decision to make.
And that's where the fans are then also going to have to say to themselves, well, what do they want? And I know most fans want the playoffs, and as well as they should. But also, like you said, it's, there might be some fans out there that are like realists. This is about the future. We're not winning a Super Bowl this year. Who cares if we make the playoffs? We'll probably be one out anyway, the way Kirk's playing. I'd rather get the kids, like you just said, I'd rather give the kids some experience so we know what we've got, and then we're off and running next year with a young quarterback. So
yeah. I think that's important, much more important long term. You need to see what he looks like. And this is a perfect situation. Like, you've got 3 easy defenses. Yeah. Two of them are, you get to have, and like the Giants, like, yeah, they had a good pass rush. Dexter Lawrence is on IR. So like, yeah, I mean, that's their best pass rusher. So that's you don't even have to worry about that now. So yeah, I mean, a soft 2-game start, then you get to see him go toe to toe with Washington, and that, will be a great barometer for you. But we know where this Kirk Cousins train leads, and he's not likely to physically improve. So at best, he's going to be a limited, probably slightly above average quarterback that can give you a great game here and there, but will also give you what we saw against the Chargers. And that will start happening with more regularity if you start playing more difficult teams. Obviously, the ceiling with Penix is way higher. Everybody knows that. Yeah. That's why they drafted him. So, if Kirk doesn't own the job and doesn't prove that he needs to stay in the job, you don't really benefit from continuing to play him because he's on his way out one way or the other.
Yep. And I don't really blame the coaching staff. I mean, the front office with the money deal with the quarterback, because this is simply the way the economics of the NFL right now. If you want, I mean, just look at the whole Daniel Jones contract situation. Even he got a boatload of cash. If you're going to bring a quarterback in, you're going to have to spend. That shouldn't be looked at as I can't believe they got that guy that much money and now we have to eat it. Well, that's just the NFL right now. It's just don't blame Atlanta, blame the economics of the league. So I would let them off the hook as far as that's concerned. But they got the matchup this week, and right now they're a 5-point dog, give or take, almost a 2-1 on the money line. The Falcons are 0-3, straight up ATS last 3, scoring just 36 points in total. By the way, that game next week is on Monday Night Football against Las Vegas on the road. And then Minnesota comes in on a 5-game winning streak, even though they're just 2-1 against the spread in those last 5, just 1-7 in their last 8 as a home favorite. So that bodes well for a close game. And we talked about that defense with Minnesota. That's their strength. We saw it. We've seen it all season. But Sam Darnold is another reclamation project that has actually worked out for a team, and he'll get a nice contract next year, but it's not going to be in Minnesota. Talk a little bit about what you feel about this matchup and where you see the Falcons, if they win this game, how they do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think how to beat Minnesota is to take advantage of turnovers. Sam Darnold has been prone to some turnovers this year. And if you can get him off his first read, he's tended to struggle more. And I don't know if the Falcons defense is capable of doing that, especially against Justin Jefferson, but that's their ticket, is to slow down this offense and try to get a turnover or two. Offensively, it comes down to Kirk Cousins. Can he survive the blitz? Can he actually, the way to beat that Vikings defense is to make quick decisions, because there is always going to be a hole. They blitz so aggressively that there will be holes in the defense. You just have to be quick enough to find them. And that doesn't bode well for him, because he can't really extend. He can't really escape the pocket. And the Falcons really haven't done much short yardage wise to help out either. But part of that is that he just doesn't, really have the arm strength to get those quick passes out there with velocity, especially the screens. So they're kind of limited with how they can protect him. Obviously, if Atlanta could run the ball well, that would help. They've just been inconsistent doing that, especially in short yardage, because they just run 11 personnel. They don't really run anything else. They're trying to be the Rams in that regard. They're just not as good at quarterback. And, they probably would benefit from using more tight ends and stuff like that. They just won't. So, running the ball would be very helpful, creating some turnovers, and they need Kirk to be able to weather the storm of this Vikings defense, which will he be able to do that? That's the big question.
Do you think that it was a coincidence, or, and again, just a guess, that after the bye, did you notice anything different of why all of a sudden the Falcons were able to come out there and put pressure on the quarterback?
They tweaked some stuff. A lot of it was they started playing like less far off in their zone coverage. They were playing extremely off coverage for most of the season. We're talking like 8 yards off, and it just felt very unnecessary given that their corners are the best part of their defense. So why are you terrified of your corners getting burnt when they're probably your best players? They toned that down. It's probably more like 5 yards off most of the time now, and that benefited them a lot. It didn't provide the open windows underneath that teams were just feasting on. It helped them shut down some screen passes and runs because those guys were closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think it caused Herbert to have to hold the ball a little bit longer because guys weren't just wide open off the snap. And I think that really helped a lot. And also they just let their defensive linemen do what they do best. Like they just let Grady shoot gaps, which is what he should always be doing. Stop having him 2 gap or 1.5 gap or whatever you're doing. He's not, that's not his game. Don't make him do that. It's a waste of time. Let him shoot a gap. He'll get in the backfield almost every time and just hope and then, if he makes enough plays, then that's great. But they also just started using the linebackers more reasonably. Caden Ellis should be blitzing and not covering.
Yeah.
He's a great blitzer, not a great cover guy. Just blitz him, and that usually means they're simming guys some of the time, so they don't always rush 5. But I think they kind of learned their lesson of like, we really just shouldn't be asking him to cover. Like, he's such a good pass rusher. We're just better off having him blitz. And Troy Anderson came back healthy too. He played a little bit. He's getting warmed back up, and they really, really need him to turn into something. We saw it against the Saints, and then he got hurt at the end of the game on special teams and hasn't played since last week. So, it's we need him. So hopefully he'll start to be a bigger part of this defense, because speed in the middle at linebacker is really what their biggest weakness right now, other than just the fact they don't have the horses in the pass rush.
Okay, just some quick ones before we let you go. Are there any injuries of concern this week?
They're getting healthier, so I don't think so. It sounds like another linebacker, J.D. Bertrand, the rookie, he's been out with a concussion for a while. He was going to practice today, Wednesday. It sounds like Ruka Roro is going to be designated to return off IR and will start his practice window today.
Okay.
No new injuries last week, it sounds like. So
okay.
There's still like a couple guys that are doing maintenance type stuff, like Darnell Mooney's, working on that Achilles injury. He hasn't missed time with it, but they're still doing maintenance type stuff there. But otherwise, it's just like Kirk isn't hurt according to him, but if he looks like he's hurt, like he did last week, that's just as bad. So hopefully that's no longer the case.
By the way, do they play man or to follow? Like, will Terrell follow Jefferson around, or they just play him on whichever side that they're going to defend? I know everybody's different.
They mostly play zone and just have guys, do stuff. But I think they have had Terrell shadow a little bit. My guess is that they'll probably try to have him shadow, but we'll see.
Okay. So. How has Justin Simmons and Judon looked?
Judon's been almost unplayable, unfortunately.
Unplayable?
He has been really bad.
Wow.
He can't defend the run at all. He just gets blown off the ball, which is new for him in his career. And he doesn't produce as a pass rusher either. So I think he might be washed, unfortunately, which doesn't really make a lot of sense considering his injury was an upper body injury, not a lower body one. So wow. I don't really know what the issue is there, but he is no longer a starter for this team, which is a huge disappointment, obviously, because they were entirely depending on him, and he has let them down completely. Simmons has been fine, not really super impactful, but he's been fine. I think the scheme has a lot to do with that. They've been having him play more like strong safety, which is kind of weird for him. And we all know he just needs to sit back there and have chances to pick off the football. That's his best trait. So this week we did see him play a little bit more like robber when he was playing in the box, and also just dropping a little bit more. And so, we'll hope that he can continue to impact, but haven't really had any issues with Simmons. Judon has been a massive bust.
And lastly, which new players, free agents, rookies, have actually played well. Because you've already given me at least one that hasn't performed all that well. But give me a couple of guys that have done a pretty good job, either free agents or rookies.
Yeah, the Falcons haven't played any rookies.
Okay.
You know, that like barely. Rukaroro played a handful of snaps in a couple games, and then went on IR. JD Bertrand played a handful of snaps in a couple games, has been out with a concussion. Their third round pick was on IR before the season started, tore his ACL in the preseason. And Michael Penix has played a handful of snaps in relief. So they've gotten nothing from this draft class so far. And that's obviously very disappointing. Free agent wise, you know, we talked about the main guys. But they've had to rely a lot on Clark Phillips because Mike Hughes has been missed time with a neck injury. Mike Hughes outside has actually arguably been their best corner, which is kind of crazy. He moved from the slot outside, just like I said he should have played last year, but whatever. You know, and he's actually been really good there, and has been a great run defender too. So the secondary has played well. When they lost D. Alford in the slot, that was a catastrophe, no matter who they put back there for the most part. They don't really have good slot depth or good safety depth. Richie Grant's also been really bad. So as long as they stay healthy, that secondary is quite good. But yeah, if they're missing more than like one guy, that's when you get the Broncos game where they just couldn't cover anything. So
okay, well, we'll have more than enough time to talk about the offseason and free agency and the draft, especially since the Falcons are right now, as of today, in the playoffs and in first place in the NFC South. As most people anticipated that it would be a battle between Tampa Bay and Atlanta, and that's where we stand. So a lot of football to be played. So Kevin, I appreciate it. We'll have links in the description, of course, for the falcoholic.com, for the site, for your shows, your podcast, your streams, and so forth. Anybody can check that out. And then look forward to, especially if things go well, or if we see Michael Penix at some point, if something big happens in Atlanta, we'll definitely hope to have you on once again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Thanks, Kevin.